Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. These words from Carl Jung capture the essence of our psychological imprisonment. Today, we're exploring the invisible architecture of your mind, the walls you've built that limit your potential without you even knowing they exist. Imagine living in a cell so familiar you've never questioned its boundaries. I'll show you how your persona, shadow, and archetypal patterns create this invisible prison. The walls may be transparent, but they're just as confining as steel bars. This video will be your key to freedom, allowing you to see these barriers for the first time. The invisible architecture of your mind. What if the walls you keep bumping into aren't made of brick and mortar, but of thought and emotion? What if the ceiling that seems to limit how high you can climb in life exists only in your mind? Most of us navigate through life encountering invisible barriers, moments where we feel stuck, unable to progress despite our best efforts. We blame circumstances, other people, or bad luck. But what if these limitations are actually psychological structures we've built ourselves? Think about that promotion you've always wanted but never pursued, or that relationship pattern you keep repeating despite promising yourself never again. These aren't coincidences or external obstacles. They're manifestations of an invisible architecture that shapes your entire reality from within. Your mind has been constructing these walls since childhood, laying psychological bricks gradually and imperceptibly. Each internalized limiting belief: I'm not creative, I'm bad with money, I always pick the wrong partner, adds another row to these unseen barriers. The process happens so subtly that by the time these walls fully enclose you, they become invisible. Not because they aren't there, but because they feel so natural you mistake them for reality itself. These psychological constructions silently direct your movements, narrow your choices, and filter your perceptions without revealing themselves as the artificial boundaries they truly are. You simply accept that certain possibilities aren't available to you, certain emotions aren't safe to feel, certain thoughts aren't permissible to think. Consider how these barriers manifest in everyday life. You repeatedly find yourself attracted to emotionally unavailable partners because your psychological architecture has established safety parameters that equate emotional distance with security. Or perhaps you've hit the same ceiling in your career multiple times, sabotaging advancement opportunities at crucial moments because an invisible barrier labeled, "I don't deserve success," activates whenever you approach it. These patterns reveal the underlying structure Jung would later identify as autonomous complexes, clusters of thoughts and emotions functioning independently within your psyche. The persistent emotional states that color your experience without clear external causes, background anxiety, unexplained sadness, disproportionate anger, are features of your psychological architecture, rooms within your mental house that you inhabit because they're familiar, even if uncomfortable. Modern neuroscience confirms this through research on neuroplasticity. Your brain physically changes as neural pathways strengthen with repetition, making familiar thought patterns increasingly automatic. When you repeatedly think, "I'm not good at public speaking," you're carving a neural pathway that makes this thought automatic, generating anxiety symptoms at the mere mention of giving a presentation. Your brain builds an invisible wall that activates before you're consciously aware of it. Imagine yourself living in a house with completely transparent walls. You navigate the same paths each day, from bedroom to bathroom to kitchen, never deviating because you've memorized the safe routes. You never question why you take these exact paths or avoid certain areas. You've bumped into those invisible barriers enough times that you unconsciously avoid them. Eventually, you forget the walls are even there. You simply accept that some spaces are inaccessible, some movements impossible. This is precisely how most people live within their minds, navigating around invisible barriers they no longer perceive, accepting limitations they don't remember creating, mistaking self-imposed psychological boundaries for immutable laws of reality. Like that transparent house, your mental architecture remains invisible because you're looking through it rather than at it. Carl Jung recognized this phenomenon decades before modern brain imaging technology. He observed that these unconscious structures don't just shape how we see the world. They literally become the lenses through which we perceive reality, invisible precisely because they're the tools of perception themselves. What would happen if you could suddenly see these walls? The moment you perceive these structures is the moment they begin to lose their absolute power over you. It's like suddenly seeing the transparent walls in your home. You might still walk the familiar paths, but now it's a choice rather than an unconscious limitation. You might press against those walls and discover they're more permeable than you imagined. This awareness creates the first crack in your psychological prison. When you recognize that your limitations aren't objective reality, but subjective constructions. When you see that the ceiling holding you down consists of thought rather than concrete, you create the possibility of reconstruction. Not through willpower, which often strengthens resistance, but by illuminating what has remained in darkness. Understanding the invisible architecture of your mind is the essential first step towards psychological freedom. You cannot dismantle what you cannot perceive. You cannot remodel a house whose blueprint remains unknown to you. This explains why many attempts at personal change fail. They try to renovate a psychological structure without first making visible its fundamental design. The patterns that feel most natural to you, your automatic emotional responses, habitual thoughts, recurring relationship dynamics, are not random or inevitable. They're architectural features of a mental construction project that's been underway since your earliest experiences. And like any human construction, they can be recognized, understood, and, when necessary, redesigned. The persona, the mask you mistake for your face. Among the most convincing walls in your psychological architecture is one you carry with you everywhere, displaying it proudly to the world, your social mask. This persona, as Jung called it, wasn't designed to imprison you. Yet for most people, it becomes the most seamless cage they'll ever inhabit, precisely because they mistake the bars for their own skin. Have you ever noticed how different versions of yourself emerge depending on context? The assertive professional, the nurturing family member, the intellectual or playful friend. Each situation calls forth a distinct you, leaving a lingering question about which represents your authentic self. The unsettling truth might be that none of them fully do. Carl Jung identified this phenomenon as the persona, a term borrowed from ancient Greek theatre where actors wore masks to indicate their roles. Your persona is the social mask you've crafted over years to navigate the complex demands of human interaction. It's the version of yourself you present to the world, carefully designed to make specific impressions while concealing aspects of your true nature that might not fit social expectations. This mask serves crucial evolutionary and social purposes. The persona offers protection in a world where complete vulnerability might leave you exposed to rejection or harm. It facilitates belonging by helping you adapt to social norms and expectations. Without some form of social mask, navigating the intricate dance of human relationships would be nearly impossible. We develop these personas instinctively, learning from early childhood which aspects of ourselves earn approval and which trigger disapproval. But here's where the prison walls begin to form. Over time, many people become so thoroughly identified with their persona that they forget it's merely a construct. The mask fuses to their face, and the role becomes indistinguishable from the actor. This over-identification with the persona creates the first, and often most impenetrable wall of your psychological prison. One that feels so natural you may never question its existence. Consider the high-powered executive who brings the same commanding presence to family dinner that she uses in boardroom meetings, unable to shift out of professional mode even in intimate settings. Or the chronic people-pleaser who has lost touch with their own preferences after years of prioritizing others' needs. These personas developed as adaptive responses to specific environmental demands. The executive learned that authority brought respect. The people-pleaser discovered that harmony prevented conflict. Initially protective, these masks became rigid constraints, limiting the full range of human expression and connection. The rigidity of the persona creates a peculiar form of suffering that's difficult to pinpoint. Many people experience a vague but persistent anxiety and emptiness that seems to have no clear source. They achieve external success and meet social expectations, yet something feels profoundly missing. This discomfort stems from the growing disconnect between the persona, the public-facing self, and the deeper, more authentic aspects of identity that remain unexpressed. This disconnection manifests as a sense that you're performing your life rather than living it. Conversations feel scripted, relationships seem superficial, and achievements ring hollow. The energy required to maintain a persona that's diverged from your authentic needs creates a chronic state of low-grade exhaustion. You might find yourself acting exactly as expected, doing everything right, yet feeling strangely absent from your own experience. The persona, while providing functional identity and social belonging, creates what Jung described as a complex system of relations between individual consciousness and society. This system becomes problematic when it forms a false identity that limits authentic expression and creates a profound sense of disconnection from yourself and others. The person you show to the world becomes a comfortable prison that prevents genuine self-knowledge and deeper human connection. What makes this prison particularly insidious is that most people have no awareness they're wearing a mask at all. The persona develops so gradually and seamlessly that it feels like a natural extension of the self rather than a constructed identity. This is why even suggesting to someone that aspects of their personality might be a social performance often triggers defensive reactions. The persona protects itself by convincing its wearer that it is the whole, authentic self. Think about those moments of strange hesitation before expressing a thought that doesn't align with how others perceive you. That hesitation marks the boundary where your persona stops and something more authentic begins to emerge. Most people retreat from this boundary, unconsciously choosing the safety of the familiar mask over the uncertainty of authentic expression. Each retreat reinforces the persona's dominance and further obscures your awareness of what lies beyond it. Yet there's profound liberation in recognizing the persona for what it is, not your true identity, but a functional interface between your inner world and outer reality. This recognition creates the first significant crack in your psychological prison walls. When you begin to distinguish between the roles you play and the authentic self behind those roles, you gain the freedom to consciously choose when and how to wear your social masks, rather than being unconsciously defined by them. This doesn't mean abandoning your persona entirely. That would be both impractical and unnecessary. The goal isn't to shatter your social mask, but to hold it lightly, to wear it with awareness rather than being worn by it. True psychological freedom comes from expanding beyond its limitations, recognizing it as just one aspect of a much richer and more complex identity. The journey beyond the persona begins with simple awareness, noticing the subtle shifts in how you present yourself in different contexts and questioning whether these adaptations serve functional purposes or have become rigid limitations. You might ask yourself, which aspects of my personality remain constant across all situations? When do I feel most authentically myself? What parts of me rarely see the light of day? These questions illuminate the boundaries between your persona and your deeper identity. The shadow, the hidden puppeteer behind your choices. Those parts of yourself that you've pushed into the darkness don't simply vanish. They grow more powerful in their exile. This hidden aspect of your psyche is what Carl Jung called the shadow, and it operates like an invisible puppeteer, pulling strings you don't even realize are attached to your thoughts and behaviors. Have you ever found yourself reacting with disproportionate anger to someone's minor transgression? Or perhaps you've wondered why you keep sabotaging relationships just as they begin to deepen. These moments offer glimpses of your shadow at work. The shadow contains everything you've rejected about yourself, qualities, emotions, and impulses deemed unacceptable by your family, society, or your own conscious mind. As children, we quickly learn which parts of ourselves earn approval and which parts trigger rejection. The too loud child learns to speak softly. The overly emotional boy learns to suppress tears. The selfish girl learns to put others first. But these rejected qualities don't disappear when banished from consciousness. They simply retreat into the unconscious, where they continue to exert influence beyond your awareness. What makes the shadow particularly insidious is that it operates through psychological compensation. The more vigorously you deny certain aspects of yourself, the more they emerge in distorted, often opposite forms. Consider the person who views themselves as fundamentally generous, but has repressed all feelings of selfishness. This individual might find themselves inexplicably triggered by others who prioritize their own needs, leading to conflicts in relationships that seem to arise from nowhere. The quality they've most firmly rejected in themselves becomes the one they react to most strongly in others. Take Sarah, who prided herself on being unfailingly punctual and organized. When her colleague arrived 5 minutes late to a meeting with a slightly disorganized presentation, Sarah experienced an intense wave of disgust and anger that surprised even her. Her reaction wasn't about the minor delay. It was her shadow revealing her own unacknowledged fear of being perceived as unprepared or chaotic, qualities she'd ruthlessly suppressed since childhood. The shadow exerts powerful influence on our relationships through projection. When we encounter in others the qualities we've suppressed in ourselves, we respond with emotional intensity that reveals more about our inner landscape than about the other person. Jung observed that the ego rarely identifies with the shadow, instead attributing these negative qualities to others. Your response to another person will be consistent with your feelings, toward what you've suppressed in yourself. This dynamic explains why certain people trigger us so intensely. They're holding up a mirror to the parts of ourselves we've refused to see. The judgmental person, who harshly criticizes others for the slightest moral failing, is often unconsciously battling their own unacknowledged impulses. The perfectionist, who demands flawless performance from colleagues, is typically projecting their own fear of inadequacy. The people pleaser, who resents others for taking advantage, is encountering their own disowned need for self-prioritization reflected back at them. Shadow material also appears as self-sabotage, unexplained emotional reactions, and persistent patterns you can't seem to break despite your best conscious efforts. Have you ever found yourself repeatedly creating the same disappointing outcome in relationships or career, despite swearing each time that this time will be different? The shadow may be orchestrating these recurring scenarios, undermining your conscious intentions with unconscious counterforces. The shadow forms early in life, typically during childhood when you're told that certain aspects of yourself are unacceptable or unlovable. These judgments come from parents, teachers, religious institutions, and cultural messages about what constitutes proper behavior. The parts you hide aren't inherently good or bad. They're simply aspects of your complete humanity that didn't receive validation. When these parts remain repressed, you'll likely experience emotional triggers, dysfunctional patterns, and a general sense of dissatisfaction that seems to have no clear source. This disconnection creates a psychological prison more confining than any external limitation. You become trapped in rigid patterns, unable to access the full spectrum of your own humanity. The businessman who has disowned his creativity might feel inexplicably drawn to artistic pursuits, but find himself unable to give them serious attention. The woman who has repressed her assertiveness might continually find herself in situations where she feels overlooked and undervalued, unable to speak up for herself. What makes shadow work so powerful is that confronting and integrating these rejected aspects of yourself releases enormous psychological energy previously used for repression. The constant effort of keeping certain qualities out of consciousness requires significant mental resources. When you begin acknowledging these disowned parts, this energy becomes available for creative expression, authentic connection, and meaningful pursuits. The shadow, when recognized and integrated, contains not only your darkest impulses, but also some of your most valuable gifts. The process of shadow integration doesn't mean giving free rein to every impulse or acting out repressed material. Rather, it involves bringing unconscious content into awareness where it loses its power to control you from behind the scenes. When you can say, "I notice I'm feeling jealous right now," the emotion no longer needs to operate through unconscious channels like projection or denial. It becomes simply another piece of information about your inner landscape, rather than a hidden force driving your behavior. Practical approaches to shadow work include identifying emotional triggers as signposts pointing to repressed material. When something provokes a reaction that seems disproportionate to the situation, you're likely encountering shadow content. Another method involves examining your judgments of others as potential projections. Dream analysis provides another window into shadow material, as recurring dream figures, especially those that disturb you, often represent shadow aspects seeking acknowledgement. One particularly effective technique involves journaling dialogues with shadow aspects, writing conversations between your conscious self and the rejected parts seeking integration. Through this process, you may discover that what you've labeled as selfish is actually healthy self-preservation, or that your laziness is your body's wisdom requesting necessary rest. The shadow, when approached with curiosity rather than judgment, reveals itself to contain valuable perspectives your conscious mind has overlooked. Now that we see how the shadow quietly steers our actions, archetypes, the universal patterns shaping your story, while dialoguing with shadow aspects reveals your personal blind spots, there's a deeper force at work beneath your individual psychology. Beyond your personal narrative lies an ancient blueprint that's been silently orchestrating your life story since before you were born. These universal patterns have been guiding human experience for millennia, appearing in dreams, myths, and stories across every culture on Earth. And they're actively shaping your reality, right now, writing scripts you may have mistaken for your own choices. These universal psychological patterns residing in what Jung called the collective unconscious are archetypes, primordial images and motifs that form the basic structure of the human psyche. Archetypes function as the psychological DNA of human experience, the fundamental building blocks that structure our emotional stories and inner landscapes. All humans share this psychological foundation regardless of culture, era, or personal history. Have you ever wondered why certain stories resonate so deeply with you? Why particular characters in films or books seem to speak directly to your soul? Or why you find yourself playing out the same relationship dynamics despite your best intentions to change? These are archetypes expressing themselves through your unique life circumstances. The hero embarking on a journey, the wise mentor offering guidance, the trickster creating chaos, the mother nurturing or devouring. These are profound psychological realities that shape how we experience the world. When you're moved to tears by a character's sacrifice or feel an inexplicable connection to an ancient myth, you're experiencing the power of archetypes resonating with something deep within your psyche. What makes archetypes particularly fascinating is their dual nature. When engaged with consciously, they can be profound sources of wisdom, strength, and transformation. However, when operating unconsciously, as they do for most people, they become rigid scripts that limit freedom and reinforce psychological imprisonment. The difference lies entirely in your relationship with these universal patterns. Consider the common limiting archetypal scripts directing your life from behind the scenes. The inner critic constantly judges your every move, finding you perpetually lacking. The perfectionist prevents action unless conditions are ideal, leaving dreams eternally deferred. The victim attributes all problems to external circumstances, keeping you powerless. The caretaker neglects self-care in service to others, creating a martyr complex that both depletes and provides identity. Each archetypal pattern creates life scripts that unfold with an almost predetermined quality. You might repeatedly cast yourself as the rescuer in relationships, always attracted to partners who need saving, only to eventually resent their dependence. Or perhaps you unconsciously embody the rebel, defining yourself in opposition to authority without developing authentic values beyond reaction. These recurring themes are archetypal scripts playing out through your unique personality and circumstances. Take Maria, a corporate executive who noticed she habitually took on the perfectionist archetype. In meetings, she'd exhaustively prepare for any possible question, spending countless hours on presentations that others created in half the time. Through therapy, she recognized this pattern stemmed from childhood experiences where anything less than perfection meant rejection. By consciously engaging with this archetype, rather than being unconsciously driven by it, she learned to channel its positive aspects, attention to detail and quality, while releasing its paralyzing demands for flawlessness. The scientific validation of these patterns has advanced significantly. The Pearson-Mar Archetype Indicator, PMAI, offers nuanced exploration of an individual's primary and shadow archetypes, providing insights into fundamental patterns shaping personality. Unlike other assessments, the PMAI focuses specifically on archetypes, offering a holistic framework for understanding the interplay between conscious and unconscious forces. The universal nature of archetypal patterns is particularly fascinating. The same fundamental psychological motifs appear across radically different cultures and historical periods, suggesting they emerge from the shared structure of the human psyche. From ancient Greek myths to indigenous folktales, from modern films to recurring dreams, these patterns persist with remarkable consistency. This universality has profound implications. It means your psychological patterns connect you to the entirety of human experience across time and culture. The jealousy you feel, the longing for belonging, the fear of abandonment, the drive for meaning. These are universal human experiences manifesting through your unique circumstances. When archetypes operate unconsciously, they create a sense of fate, as if your life follows a predetermined script you never chose. You may wonder, why do I keep recreating the same painful situations? The answer lies in archetypal patterns running on autopilot. The first step toward freedom is recognizing these patterns as psychological templates that can be engaged with consciously. Jung observed that when group archetypes become rigid, hindering psychological development, the unconscious intervenes to destabilize them. Groups that reassure each other that problems lie outside themselves fall into regressive restoration of the persona. This dynamic leads to scapegoating individuals who challenge the group's identity, visible in workplace culture and political movements alike. The liberating power comes when you recognize these patterns and relate to them consciously. Rather than being unconsciously possessed by the warrior archetype, you can consciously engage its energy when appropriate, channeling its strength and boundary-setting abilities. without being consumed by its potential for aggression or black and white thinking. During the COVID-19 pandemic, a student named Ethan experienced a profound shift through what researchers called an awakened awareness perspective. By accepting what he couldn't change, Ethan found himself more at peace with myself and with reality. This transformation wasn't about rejecting archetypal patterns, but developing a new relationship with them, moving from rigid scripts to conscious engagement. Consider how this might apply in your own life. If you've always identified with the caretaker archetype, conscious engagement doesn't mean abandoning care for others, but recognizing when this pattern becomes limiting. You might discover that beneath lies the hero's journey of self-discovery or the ruler's capacity for wise stewardship of resources, including your own energy. Case study: Sarah's journey from invisible walls to freedom. These theoretical frameworks offer valuable insights. But what happens when someone actually begins to see the invisible walls of their psychological prison? Sarah's story illuminates the profound transformation that becomes possible when unconscious patterns suddenly come into view.